Hello, this is Peter Tung here, and I'm here to help you navigate your way through your Gene Key profile. And you'll have this video recording for your own sake, so you can take your time and just check in the different sections. It's going to be an overall view of how the Gene Key profile works on your behalf, and looking at the 11 spheres that make up the profile. Your own profile obviously will be specific to you, so I'm just going to talk in general terms about the way the profile works today. It's possible for you to get a profile for any time, any date, any place in the world. So if you want to get a profile for any particular occasion, a project that you're involved in, your business, a grandchild that's been born, whatever you wish to do, you can find that profile. So what I chose to do for setting up this particular video was to use the profile for the equinox, which has just taken place, because it is the beginning of the new year astrologically. And the Gene Keys is tied into the astrological cycle, so it seemed to be the appropriate thing to do to set ourselves on our way on this new journey, on our own Grail quest into the Gene Key profile. So without further ado, we'll move into the way in which the profile works. This is the Gene Key profile for the equinox, March the 20th, 2:58 p.m, which was just last week, just as we're now doing this recording. So this is the overall profile that every single person will see for their birth moment, the location and time. And the profile is made up of 3 sequences. The outer sequence is the activation sequence, the 4 green spheres on the outside edge. And these 4 spheres are the spheres that will hold you in your core physical stability for the rest of your life once you have shifted out of the shadow frequency and into the gift frequency. There are 3 words associated with each sphere according to your particular Gene Key profile. The red word is the shadow frequency, the green word is the gift frequency, and the blue word is the so-called siddhi frequency, which is a divine essence. So what we are really doing is intentionally shifting out of our shadow frequencies and into our gifts. And the siddhis will descend upon us when it's time. And it begins with us getting glimpses into those states of bliss, of harmony, of joy, of peace. And what we want to do is just allow those frequencies to flow over us and through us and saturate every single cell in our body, and not attempt to try and work out what's happening or to understand or to analyze. If we do that, those feelings just go away very quickly. So in shifting from the shadow into the gift, then we are preparing ourselves so that we handle those moments efficiently. The journey begins at the very top with the life's work, and the life's work is the outer edge where you meet the outer world and the outer world sees you. It's the way in which you present yourself out in the world. And the evolution on the right hand side is the programming partner of the life's work, which means together they work against you in the shadow frequency, and they work together for you in the gift and the siddhi. So when you're working with Richard Rudd's book, The Gene Keys, you don't read the book cover to cover, you read it according to your Gene Keys, starting with the life's work. First is the first chapter you work with, and then the evolution is the second chapter you work with, and then you look at how the 2 play off each other in the shadow frequency and in the gift frequency. The evolution on the right hand side is the driving force for the journey. It's the fuel that takes you on your own personal Grail quest. So this can be the first stumbling block before you can actually move forward on the journey. So the life's work and the evolution is called the conscious challenge, because this is where the journey begins, and you know you're now moving into this journey of the journey around these 11 spheres. From there we go all the way across to the radiance and purpose, which are also a programming pair, and so they work together against you in the shadow and for you in the gift. The radiance is your inner world, It's your inner light shining out. It's your inner health and well-being and the environment in which you best thrive. And the purpose at the bottom is your soul's purpose for your learning in this lifetime. It's what your soul wants you to experience and move through to transform your life from the inside out. So we want to make sure on the journey that the soul's purpose at the bottom and the life's work at the top are perfectly aligned with each other. And that's when we start living a life of contentment and fulfillment, when these 5 spheres up the center are in alignment with each other. The radiance and soul's purpose is called the unconscious challenge because these are more deeply buried and harder for us to access. So we have to mine deeper to get down to these 2 gene keys. Once we've got a real sense of those 4 keys and we can feel how they're operating in our life, this brings us out of the activation sequence, the green spheres, and into the pink spheres of the Venus sequence. You can see the purpose is half green and half pink because it's the gateway or entry into the Venus sequence. And the Venus sequence is where we take a deep dive into our primary relationships and into our childhood to see what it is that is running programs of our conditioning, our genetics and our early childhood experiences, and any traumas that we have as we move through our lives. And that begins with the attraction field. And the attraction field is where we sort of act like a whirlpool, and we pull into our lives all those people who are here to show us something that we need to see. Some of those people, we have lovely, open-hearted, kind, generous relationships, and some of them are a challenge. So we look into those challenging relationships to see what it is about this person that triggers some reaction in us. It could be things that they say, certain ways they behave, but what we're actually seeing and feeling is our own wounded self, our own unhealed self. And so we look into those triggers and take full responsibility for our behaviour in those circumstances and recognise that we now need to look deeper into our childhood to see what it is that's triggering those responses. So from the attraction field, we now move into the 3 spheres in the centre, the IQ, the EQ and the SQ, to see what it is about our childhood that we need to understand. The SQ is the first trimester of your mother's pregnancy and the first 7 years of life. The SQ stands for spiritual quotient, but really this is the way we create a physical body around the vibrational frequency we are being exposed to in the womb. So the state our mother is in during the pregnancy, whether she's happy being pregnant, her relationships, her environment, her breathing patterns, her eating habits, they all play a role in our developing fetus. Then we come out into the world and we experience our world for the first 7 years, and we continue to incarnate into physical form. That takes us into the EQ, which is the second trimester of the pregnancy, which imprints into the age 8 to 14. And the EQ is the emotional quotient. So this is about the development of our emotional body. And so now this is how we relate in the world, but it's also the time of puberty. So as we're going through these deep physical changes inside ourselves, we're trying to establish ourselves in our peer group. So this can be a time of uncertainty, confusion, even a sense of inadequacy. Then we move into the IQ. The IQ is the 3rd trimester of the pregnancy, which imprints into the age 15 to 21. The IQ is the intellectual development, and so now the mind begins to take over. And the challenge with that is the mind is very good at creating a cover story to cover up any earlier childhood suffering. So when we work with Richard's book, we start with the life's work and the evolution, looking at those 2 together as a pair. Then we go into the radiance and purpose and look at those 2 together as a pair. And then we come up into the Venus sequence and we start with the attraction field. Then we move into the IQ, and then into the EQ, and into the SQ. Because we need to get underneath the mind to get through the emotional body and back into the physical body. And the way this works is when you're reading a chapter in the book, which is one of your gene keys. Richard writes beautifully. He was a poetry and literature major at university, and so his expression is beautiful. So as you're reading one of your keys, so you're getting a mental understanding of how that key plays out in your life through the shadow, the gift, and the siddhi. And what happens is, as you're reading it and it's one of your keys, it begins to slowly but surely unlock. It's like a combination lock, unlocking, as you now become more connected to the way in which that key operates in your life. So you start becoming more aware of the repetitive patterns that you've lived by through your thoughts, your values, your beliefs, through your feelings and emotional reactions to things. And so what happens is you now start becoming aware of those repetitive patterns. And when you catch yourself in one of those patterns, you pause and you breathe and you step out of that pattern. And what happens is, to begin with, you tend to catch yourself just after you've done the pattern. And you don't get upset with yourself, because it means you're becoming more aware of how that pattern is playing a role in your life. And then what happens is we start catching ourselves earlier on in the process. So we now catch ourselves in process. And again, we pause and we breathe and we step out of the process. And then there's this wonderful moment when we catch ourselves before we even start the process. We can give ourselves a little pat on the back, because now there's going to be an actual physical change in the DNA, and you'll never repeat that pattern again. You've shifted out of the shadow frequency and into the gift frequency of that particular key. And it can come up in these keys as you're going through them, or they can come up at any time as you go through the process. So we just keep going through this process and checking in with ourselves and looking into these repetitive patterns. So this is the beautiful way in which the healing takes place, beginning in the mind, moving through the emotions, and then finally into the physical. And it's always in the physical last before we actually see the change taking place inside the physical body. Now, unfortunately, there's one error in the profile which we have to look at very closely, and that is in this vocation sphere, which you can see is completely blue on the profile. And that sphere should be half pink and half blue. So if you continue that diagonal line coming up from the SQ, there's an arrow there, straight through the center of the vocation. The lower half of that sphere should be pink. The upper half is blue. The upper half is the vocation. The number before and after the decimal point is the same for the whole sphere, but the lower half is the pink Venus sequence final piece, and it is called the ancestral core wound. It's the moment of conception, when your parents conceived you and they imprinted into your DNA the sacred wound of the ancestors. So one of the roles that you've agreed to play in this lifetime is, when you became aware of that, is to clear that wound on your own behalf, and in so doing, clearing it on their behalf. It's the greatest gift you can offer your ancestral lineage, and it may reflect itself through your matriarchal lineage, the patriarchal lineage, or both. But because we know the gene key and the line number, we know exactly what it is that we need to do to clear that wound. So this is the transformation from the Venus sequence into the Pearl sequence. So when you're working with the shadow of the core wound, you're in the pink section, and once you've healed that, you step up into the gift of the vocation of that same gene key and line. So there's this magical transformation that takes place from the deepest, darkest shadow into the greatest gift that you can have in your life. So now the transition from the Venus sequence into the Pearl sequence takes place, and what that means is that all that work you've done on yourself through the Venus sequence, you now bring back out into the world into the Pearl sequence. So this is how you bring all of that learning you've gained about yourself back out into the world. So the vocation sphere is now the work that you're here to do in the outer world. And then we move into the culture. And the culture are the people and circumstances and opportunities and synchronicities and serendipity that you're now going to attract into your life because you're now in a higher vibration, having done your inner Venus work. And these people and circumstances and synchronicities are going to come to you. So you don't go looking for them, they're going to show up. So you now start paying attention in your life to what is happening in your life, to show the support you're going to receive to fulfill your divine destiny. So now you go back to the very top where you started the journey in the life's work, and now you've come back to the very beginning, but now you're in a higher octave of frequency, and now in the blue section of the life's work, now you're really clear on who you are, what you're here to do, and how you're going to do it. And this blue section of your life's work is called your brand. This is how you present yourself out in the world. It's rather like the tip of the iceberg that is showing above the surface is what you see, but below that there's a great deal more going on within you. And you're now presenting yourself out in the world to reflect that deeper inner aspect of you. From there you come down into the pearl sequence, down into the pearl itself within the pearl sequence. And the pearl is the final harvest for all the work that you have done. When you activate the pearl, you start living your life in fulfillment and contentment. And when you do that, you start secreting these beautiful biochemical molecules of pleasure. So not only are you in an elevated emotional state because you've done all your Venus work, but you're now actually producing these feel-good chemicals. And I will just mention, this is where the work of Richard Rudd ties in beautifully with the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who has done the medical analysis of the brainwave frequencies of people in a deep, profound, blissful meditative state, and also the chemical composition of these feel-good chemicals. So the work of Joe Dispenza and Richard Rudd are really a divine complement, because Richard's is the philosophical approach to heal the wounds from within and telling us exactly what those shadow frequencies are. And then the Joe Dispenza work actually shows us how it actually works its way through our system and how we can heal all of those wounds. So I do recommend his latest book, which is called Becoming Supernatural, which will tie in perfectly with your journey around the gene keys. So now we need to talk about your actual keys and how your profile comes about. So in 1996, Richard Rudd had this very profound experience where he was shown how creation took place through the sacred geometrical patterning of the 64 hexagrams of the Chinese I Ching, and how those 64 hexagrams coincided precisely with the codons in our DNA. In other words, all of creation resides within us. And what we are doing is unraveling those codes back to our true divine nature. And you'll see around the outside edge of the profile these little grey structures. And they are the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. Each hexagram contains 6 lines. It's a binary code, so it could be a broken line or a solid line, which gives those 64 combinations. And each year the sun moves around that disk just once. So each gene key gets illuminated for just under 6 days. And so on the day that you were born, the life's work at the top is the gene key that was being illuminated by the sun on that day. And that's why it's your life's work at the very top of your profile. So the number before the decimal point in your life's work is the gene key that was being illuminated by the sun on that day. And the number after the decimal point is which line of the hexagram was being illuminated by the sun on that day. So it means you were born on that particular line of the hexagram in that gene key. And it's the sort of flavour through which you work that gene key through in your life. It's the theme of the way in which you live that gene key out through that line number. And those lines correspond to the chakras. So line 1 is the base chakra, line 2 the sacral, line 3 the solar plexus, line 4 the heart, line 5 the throat, line 6 both chakras in the head, the third eye and the crown. And so in your profile you're going to see the number before the decimal point in every sphere is the gene key involved, and the number after the decimal point is which line of the hexagram that you are functioning on in that gene key. So the number before is the gene key, the number after is the line. And that gives us the general overview of the profile, and from there we can now start looking deeply into your own particular profile. So I urge you to prepare yourself for our session by listening to this video and really getting a sense of how the profile fits together, so that we can spend our time together really looking deeply into your specific aspects through the gene keys and the lines. So now you have a sense of how this profile works, and I suggest you look at it as often as you need to get an understanding of the whole profile and how it works. If you have any questions, do jot them down. You can ask me at the beginning of our session exactly what is entailing in the process, or any aspects that you didn't fully understand from the video, and then we can take a deep dive into your own particular profile, all the lines and the keys. So if you have any specific questions or any insights or any awarenesses that you wish to have, again, make a note of them, and at the very beginning of our session together I will give you the opportunity to let me know what your intentions are, what your wishes and hopes are, and what you hope to get out of the session. So I hope this video has been very helpful in setting you up for our time together, and I really look forward to having that session with you. It's Peter Tongue, wishing you all the very best.